Okay, we don't have much time, and we've touched upon many different topics today. So I want to just start, is there some burning questions that you want to ask this expert audience, panel from the audience? I guess there has to be some questions.
You can ask anything.
Yeah.
Fredrik knows everything.
Yeah. So Ola is...
I was just wondering, in multiple myeloma research, multiple myeloma research and treatment, how is artificial intelligence placed? I know in certain types of cancer treatment, the data processing and access to information is already in place, but AI, how is that in the treatment?
Who wants to try? Yeah. If you have one, you can send around up here. So.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think there are two parts to the question. One is in the research area, where we are all beginning to use it quite significantly, especially because we have large data, and that's where AI comes into the picture. And if there's a reiterative data set, that's where it can learn and do further analysis. So there's neural network analysis, and I think Hartmut showed his version of neural network analysis as well. So identifying, say, frailty, for example, or risk features, etc., is becoming very helpful and important. And we have huge size data. On the genomic size, for example, our own group has around 1.2 to 1.3 petabyte of data. That's not easy to handle or analyze properly. So I think that's where one very easy application of AI. The second component is going to be decision-making in patients area, which is where I think we have to wait and see how the data is accumulated, analyzed for practical application. And that's where there are lesser effort, but there will be greater need as we move forward. It might be utilized best by the patients eventually, but not there yet.
I think it's quite difficult when it comes to decision making. It will be so for a very long time. We don't do this, but we had one mathematical PhD student working on data from the IKEMA and ICARA study to see if you put in all the data, could you predict anything at all? And of course, this was not a huge data set. But it was disappointingly difficult to. The only thing that can actually be used, if you follow the patients for a significant number of length of time, you could predict something about what happens afterwards. But if that time wasn't really long, it was very difficult. And if you put in all the factors they knew about the patients from before, it's still too difficult to predict anything. So I think it will take a long time before this is this biology is captured by AI. There's so many things we don't know about our patients.
I want to give a comment from a different view. As I was very young, there was a discussion about chess. Will the championship lose every game against the computer? And today we have the situation. The world championship in chess, it's not able to win any game against the computer. This is a time over 50 years needs to be in this region, and I'm sure we will have also some success in medicine and in artificial intelligence. From the German view, we look sometimes to the United States, because in German it's the protection of genomic data very high, and it is very difficult to have an exchange with the American colleagues, as an example, with the German data. And we are also in discussion with our government to have more possibility to exchange data. And if you look at the United States, Netherlands, France, there are some activities, and you look at the results of these activities, not every time the same result is coming out. And therefore the international network is essential to be successful and to have data from different centers, from different groups, and we need artificial intelligence to match these data.
Well, and lastly, I think it will be needed in order to move away from prognostic to predictive factors. We're always talking about personalized medicine, but we're not that personalized at all. And I think the big data analysis integrating genomics, proteomics, metabolomics in order to get the persons who are really benefiting from the treatment is really needed. And I think it will take some years, but in the end, it will find the way, like Hartmut is saying, like playing chess is also really changed over the years.
Yeah.
I would go to the last speaker and ask your neighbors if the cilta-cel or the bispecific antibodies will not be approved in Norway, for example. How many years or time do you think that will deprive myeloma patients in Norway? The difference from you in Germany, who has access, and of course in America, where at least a big part
How many years are patients
Losing. Yeah.
are losing, yes.
It's hard to say. Who wants to give a...
Yeah, I think in the old days, which is 2-3 years ago, if one does not have access to a drug, and we go strictly by the numbers, the median survival would be 8 months, 10 months. Now, truthfully, one bispecific or one CAR-T, his median survival is more than 3 to 4 years. That's one CAR-T. And then you have bispecific and you have different GPRC5D and other targets. So I think not having access tremendously affects patients' life. And we have many patients where we once in a while show in my talk, and my colleagues as well, where over the last 10 years, patients got a new drug, survived 2-3 years, and there is another new drug, and then survive longer. And so I think it's very difficult to give a number, but I think the impact would be and could be quite significant, and especially because how effective these new treatments are. So in old days, maybe 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, which is still important, but now it is in years, and I think it would be very big impact.
Okay.
Okay. There's, from the German view, interesting discussion with the government. They are paying not so much enough money for palliative treatment. And myeloma in these days is a palliative treatment in the view from the government. And we have shown, and others have shown, that we have long-lasting remission. And hopefully we can increase the number of these patients with at least long-lasting remission. And the future would be to tell a subgroup, 5%, 10%, whatever, 20%, could be 10 years in complete remission. And then we can discuss with the government, this subgroup, not every myeloma patient will be cured. And this is the next step that we have to discuss, because on the other hand, they're saying palliative treatment, use dexamethasone, and it is enough, and it's not enough.
Also, just to comment, and I think it was a question also that that you raised also in the after my speech. I think is we have the regulatory approval by the FDA or the EMA, and then you have some time, which this was the time that I was showing until you have a reimbursement, so approval on a national, if it's publicly reimbursed or not. And I think that you will always have a time from the regulatory approval to a national approval to reimbursement, but we're trying to reduce that time, because I understand from the government side and also from the industry side, you need to have a good sort of application process and to demonstrate the data and the value that you bring. But the 542 days that I showed for the oncology, and it's even longer for orphans, we need to significantly take that down.
In the case of that, curative and palliative is a little bit absurd in hematology, because you have AML, for example, okay, it's curative, but if you take, and it's the same age, 70 years old as a medium, but if you say take a life expectancy, I think there will be no difference. Perhaps the myeloma, yeah. So it's something absurd to okay, you can be more sure that you are cured when it's positive your treatment, but I think as a total of the whole patient population, I think there is no difference.
Yeah, I agree, because we are knowing myeloma is a disease of older patients, and the median age is 70, as you pointed out, and therefore for patients 70 look forward to 80. It's 10 years, and that is fine, and the median survival in Germany for the population is 80 years around these days. And there's a difference, especially for the patients older than 70 and younger than 70. And the problem that I see, it's for patients 40 years old and so on. I agree with you. On the other hand, the situation in Germany, you saw here the slides, the decision duration was very short in Germany to get an approval, and that the government is paying for the drug, not only make the approval. The second part is the money. And now they are much more conservative, and I pointed out they discussed with dexamethasone versus bispecifics at this time. That is, in my view, absurd. And on the other hand, this is a regulatory approval, and therefore we have to show the data on MRD negativity, what we are doing in research, and from the German, we will say long-term survival, it's the best way for our patients. And on the other hand, the companies, they are working to say, okay, there's a subgroup, it's possible to cure, and this is an argument to discuss with the government.
First, I will ask Katrine Bryne, did you say that you will now into the new calculations of before the reimbursement will take into consideration to save money on if people go back to work, the nurses' costs, consultation for controls, all those things will go into the calculations?
Being discussed is, am I using this or this?
We can hear you.
So what's being discussed in the new expert groups is basically if you can include, if you can come back to work, so what we call produksjonseffekter, so the productivity gains, maybe it's not the right current translation. That is what's being discussed, if it should be allowed to demonstrate sort of that wider value. So that say that that if you take this medicine, then you are so and so likely to maybe return to work. And also, okay, if you, for example, have a sick child, if the caregivers can also then return to work. That's being discussed. It's not concluded or anything yet. It has been discussed for many years, and it's an ethical, difficult debate, because then you would maybe the younger will then maybe be prioritized if that's included. But today, when it's not included, then you can say also that it's unethical, that way it's not handled. So it's a balancing, it's a very ethically balancing debate, but it's now being discussed again, and it's also being put into context that we are in a very different economic climate now than we were, 10 years ago. We are now also trying to have different incomes than oil and gas industry. We have a older population that's growing that we also need to finance in the years coming. So we need to ask ourselves also these questions: can we afford not to include it? But it also has to be done in a very ethically balanced way. So.
But another thing is like with the CAR-T, I understand that people are not coming, they don't want to come to the controls and patients as a resource, because then you can go into self-controls with, if you have your blood samples and you can click into an app how you're feeling, and then you don't have to get in. So that could also be a part of the calculation, that people, the best treatment is when they not need to come back, that they're in remission. So that could also be a kind of cost that you should implement into new calculations.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think some of these costs, such as time taken to visitations or nurse costs and otherwise, they are included in the analysis today. It's more the wider societal benefits that's being discussed. Yeah.
More questions in the audience? If not, I have one to the whole panel. So Nikhil showed perfectly the MRD curves. If you get MRD negativity, you live longer. Hartmut showed us that if you have a high-risk population, you can treat them effectively with the Katrine trial. And we know the Optimum trial also showed good results for high-risk patients. Sonja showed us that maybe being off therapy can be good for quality of life. And then my question is for the panel, how far are we from steering our treatment after response, or lack of response, or bad response? From ALL or trials, we know ALL treatment, we steer after MRD negativity. When can we do that in myeloma? When is sustained MRD negativity the time to stop treatment for some? And when should we step up and give all we got? That's... Fredrik, you can start.
So I will start. I think the most important thing is that this should be based on studies. And there are numerous studies checking out this. Nikhil showed one study, the master study, but that's not really finding out the answer, because it's not randomizing. And it showed that if you're not high risk and you're MRD negative, the survival is good, but the follow-up is still short. And I think the basis, let's say first line mainly, the basis of stopping treatment, in my opinion, is that the patients are cured. And before we get the immunotherapies into first-line trial, the cure rate is very low, 10%, 50%. So I think that my belief is that when these drugs get into first line, we see how many are not relapsing, and this will take years. Then we can start also analyzing the trials that are randomizing between intensifying or de-intensifying and stopping after 3 years of sustained MRD. But for now, this should not be part of the standard of care, in my opinion. And there was one Canadian trial that was interesting, I think. It showed, I think it was Pomcidex and then an additional drug, and they randomized between giving the quadruplet first and then, or adding when you had a relapse. And it showed the survival benefit of the quadruplet from the start. Not many such studies are ongoing. And I think your study, Sonja, is really important, but I don't think the break arm will win in the end. But we need to do those kind of studies. But that's my belief. But I think it will be different when you have a cilta-cel trial or a finite course of some bispecific. Then there is a significant fraction of patients, I'm positive, they will not relapse. And then you start to define what's the definition of stopping those patients. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah, so to add to that comment, yeah, no, you can go ahead.
No, I'll come back to you. Please go. Well, a comment, of course, on Fredrik, but I totally agree with Fredrik that we probably have to await the methodological right trials in order to either stop an MRD negativity or increase the therapy in MRD positive patients. Although when you look at several studies now, like the UK trial, you can see that whenever you're 3 years in MRD negative status, the chance of getting your disease back is very, very low. The same, I think, for the trial that Nikhil showed, not when you have too high risk features, but when you don't have too high risk features, you probably can stop in sustained MRD. So for individual patients, weighing also the balance of efficacy and toxicity, you can probably do also in your general practice, well, at least consider to stop therapy and then await the trials. Then for the comment, of course, on Fredrik on the STOP trial, I think you're right in the sense that when you only look at progression-free survival, then you will lose progression-free, because whenever you stop the therapy, there will be earlier progression. On the other hand, we looked at the combined endpoint at event-free survival, because we know in an elderly population that patients will also stop therapy because of toxicity. We take that as an endpoint, so event-free survival might even be superior. We did simulations, and the event-free survival might even be better in the discontinuation arm. And probably there also it will be personalized medicine. In some patients you can stop, and in other patients you can't stop, and therefore we do the correlative studies in order to identify it in which patients it's safe to stop. And I think in all those trials we really have to look at the biological correlative side studies in order to really personalize the treatment much more than only look at the final endpoint between the two arms, because it's much more difficult than that.
So I mean, I agree, and I was going to add to what Fredrik said, is that in the past, for example, the French IFM 209 versus determination US part clearly showed that you need to continue maintenance forever. However, if you look at the US study, the median time on maintenance was 3 years. And then for various toxicity and other reason, patients stopped. And the benefit still continued. So there is going to be possibility of stopping at some point. Has to be based on study and data, not probably arbitrary. The chance of that happening has tremendously increased from the past versus now, when all the new treatments are able to get such a deep responses even late. So that now if you look at current studies, most of them have been so far what patients in the US at least call very fondly, one and done. You get one CAR T and then nothing else for as long as they are in remission. And we have had patients, even as a 6-line treatment, who have had CARVYKTI and it's been 4+ years and in remission, MRD negative. So those patients are probably cured, and we'll find out, or we'll be bold enough to say they're cured. We are just right now timid and we're not yet getting there. So the answer to short or a long answer to your question is that I think there will be a time when it will happen. Probably it's not going to be applicable to all the patients. So task for biologically in the lab for us is which patients we can stop and do nothing and which patients we do. And to that, I feel that patients with smoldering and MGUS progressing to myeloma, their response in general are not deep enough. They may end up getting longer, etc. But which subclass will be stopped and which will be not is an ongoing studies to determine.
Great, thanks.
We will have a meeting in December in San Diego, and this is a meeting from the International Myeloma Society, and there will be the big trials and the responsible persons from France, from United States, from Netherlands, from Norway, and we will discuss what trials are ongoing, and hopefully to prioritize the questions and to say, okay, the Spanish and the UK group, it's looking at high risk, and the best definition, what means high risk. If we want to discuss a half hour about high risk, it's possible, because the different group has different views. And in my view, the community that we have as an example in the International Myeloma Society has the power and the situation to harmonize trials, to discuss and to have a strategy, not tactic trials, to have a strategy how we can answer the questions.
Great.
Yeah, just a small comment to what was said. Regarding the termination and the 3 months on land before they stop in a study that you're supposed to be on it forever, I think that that's very different from, let's say, having 2 years and stop, because in that group, a lot of patients will stop before, but no one will go beyond. And if you say 3 years, median, it means that 50% of the patients are still on LEN after that, and they are also driving part of the benefit. But there's another thing, it's that, which was Sonja alluded to also, is that you have to separate the approach and what you actually do in a patient with toxicity. That's completely different. So I think the point is that for a patient tolerating a treatment, it's always best to be on it. But if it's not tolerated, then it's a completely different story. Then you need to sort of titrate and find out what's the best and personalizing or what do you think. But to stop just because there's a good response in a patient that really tolerated the treatment, I think it's never good, except maybe with bispecifics, but that's a different discussion.
Okay, I think we're at the end of the day. Maybe Ola wants to say something in the end. Thanks to all participants today. It was excellent talks.
Thank you to the panel. Everybody has given a good contribution here. Thank you to Tobias. You did very well. And I also like to say a special thank you to Fredrik, who has worked together with us to develop the program for this day. And I hope all of you will have a feeling that you have learned something, you experienced something, and that it's useful for the work you are doing with multiple myeloma. Then I'd like to wish the panel a safe trip home. Thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you for the work you are doing. Thank you for the work you're doing for the patients. That's the main target. That's the work you're doing, which is very important for us as an organization. Thank you, and safe trip home all.